I love conspiracy theories, but usually the old stuff that was fit for a Tom Clancy novel, or a Mark Greaney Gray Man, something like that. Those are the conspiracy laws I like. As a child of the '80s, man, going through the Iran Contras and the Cold War and all of that stuff, I absolutely find this stuff fascinating. And one of the things that was always was the Clintons. Now, hear me out. They're all in it together. And this conspiracy theory I've always found interesting because it was one of those that was set in motion 15 years before Bill Clinton became president. And I find this one really fascinating, and it has to do with Mena, Arkansas. Now, when I was working for Raytheon, a lot of our planes were all finished down there. And I've always found that a little odd, a little private airport out in the middle of nowhere. Oh, it's not private, it's a municipal airport. But out in the middle of nowhere, and it has an aircraft service. But Raytheon has had a long history of being involved with the U.S. government in all sorts of things, Beechcraft and Raytheon for that matter. So that always made it kind of interesting to me. Well, that and Kansas has such a high excise tax that they fly the planes out of state to finish them because, well, they're not paying taxes. That's what corporations do. Make it hard for them to do business, they go elsewhere. But I digress. Let's talk about Mena, Arkansas. Now, for all of you that remember the crack epidemic of the 1980s, the inner city, especially out west, I'm going to tie all of this in together. Now, mind you, this is just speculation. It's a conspiracy. But it might get you thinking about a few things. So, in 1979, Jimmy Carter ripped foreign aid from countries all over the world. So, as I've talked about before, Iran fell, Iraq fell, Afghanistan fell, and then got invaded by the Russians. Lebanon fell shortly after that. The Middle East collapsed. But there was another country that collapsed too. And we never talk about that. And that country was Nicaragua, a major hub for cocaine smuggling. So, what ended up happening when all of the CIA's funding got cut, they had to go start finding funding somewhere else. So, enter the Iran-Contra. Now, you're going to be like, oh, here we go. Trust me, I rolled my eyes a little at too. But it's kind of fascinating. And this is where all these forces came together in a little town called Mena, Arkansas. And this is completely bipartisan. I found it fascinating. So, we all remember the story American Made with Barry Seal and all that. They made him out to look like a good guy. He was not. He was just another CIA stooge taking his money. Now, what ended up happening in Mena, Arkansas was the CIA needed a place to train the Contras that was similar to Nicaragua, and they could do it with impunity, I guess is the right word. Well, Arkansas in the 80s was the Wild West. It still kind of is. Before Las Vegas, Hot Springs was a gambling hotspot. And Arkansas has always had a history of being very fast and loose with the rules. And in the 70s and 80s, it was no different. So enter a young, ambitious attorney general named Bill Clinton, who later became he was the governor and the attorney general. And, we all know what Slick Willie did. So he is approached. The federal government moves in and starts using the landing strip in Mena, Arkansas to train Contras. They were trying to get money together. Now, they also used it for other things. Enter Barry Seal. Barry Seal, like we all know, was running cocaine from South America to Mena, Arkansas. Now, one of these things that you're going to notice when you start doing a lot of these conspiracies and you start digging in is that there's a lot of names that keep popping up. I noticed this with the JFK assassination all the way through Watergate. The same names kept popping up. Well, enter several people. The names you're going to remember that are going to keep popping up are George H.W. Bush, Bill Clinton, Bill Barr, remember him, and Colonel Oliver North. So these names keep popping up. So what they were doing, and this is kind of my take on this, because you can look this up in 1983, Bill Clinton and Don Tyson were indicted for drug running in Tyson trailers. About that same time, Roger Clinton went to prison, and there's all sorts of weird things that were going on. And then Barry Seal gets executed. But we'll talk about that in a minute. So you bring all these people together, and they're kind of operating their own private goon squad outside the scope of the U.S. government, which the CIA is notorious for doing. Now, this is my own synopsis, and this is why this video isn't going to be that long. When Tyson bought Hudson Foods, there was an E. coli scare, and all Tutson chicken was recalled. Bankrupted Hudson. Guess who bought it for pennies on the dollar? Tyson. Now, Tyson had been trying to buy Hudson for years. Hudson would not sell. And I'm a firm believer that this was Bill Clinton's thanks to Tyson for helping him back in the 80s. But that's my own speculation. So, you've got cocaine funneling into Arkansas. You've got money funneling out. The cocaine gets put on commercial vehicles and sent all over the country. And suddenly, at the same time, there's a crack epidemic in New York and LA. So what do you think's happening there? So one of the weirdest things I've noticed when I start getting into all these conspiracy theories is that all these people involved have dirt on all these people involved. The reason I believe Barry Seal got executed by the Contras was because he had dirt and he threatened to blackmail. The guy wanted his money instead of just playing ball. When you start punching above your weight with people in levels of power like this, you're as good as dead. That's the long and short of it. He made a pest of himself, and they took care of him. These are not people who play. So that's my thoughts on why that happened. So what about Bill Clinton? Well, Bill and his wife have been the Bonnie and Clyde of American politics for 40 years. I've never thought that they were internationally politically corrupt and all that. They're just thieves. They're just good old-fashioned gangsters. And but they will destroy anybody in their way. Which is, yeah, you don't want to be a good, close, personal friend of them. But you've got George H.W. Bush dictating this stuff from the White House as vice president at the time. Ronald Reagan was a real hands-off kind of president. He delegated. From everything I've read, he was a delegator. He tell you what you want to do, you just better go do it. But then you got George H.W. Bush, and his buddies from the CIA, and these are guys that have cultivated. And this is, what people don't remember is that these are guys that had cultivated personal connections with all sorts of organized crime for the last 40 years. These are the guys on the tip of the spear who know where the bodies are buried. That's part of why people like Hoover stayed in business for so long, because he had dirt on everybody. And as long as you played ball, he'd leave you alone. So when you start dealing with people of this level, it gets really it gets real fascinating. And this is what great political novels are made of. So the CIA was funding their Contras operation by selling arms to Iran, by selling arms to Contras. They were, selling crack for basically budget money. Which In hindsight, it's kind of funny, was they weren't using any taxpayer money at all. Go figure. But then you get people all wrapped up into it who had nothing to do with it, like Freeway Rick Ross. Yes, he was a crack dealer, and he ended up going to prison for quite a long time. But they just used cutouts, shills, and all of these companies, these shell companies, to wash money and all that. So if you really ever want to have an interesting conspiracy theory, start digging into the Iran-Contras. This is the kind of thing that just the best novels are made of. Don't get me wrong, these people are dirty. But the fascinating thing is they were operating outside the scope. Were there senators involved? Most assuredly. But was it the whole of the U.S. government? No. It was a select number of people and their own personal goon squad. And this is one of those things I've noticed from the 60s, 70s into the 80s that really kind of you saw a bit of. But then, into the 90s, it all kind of died. Now, are there personal goon squads still today? There are. But they do operate, I believe, in a different capacity. So, when you really start thinking about it, the reason these guys were successful as they were was because there was nobody there to challenge them. So, you got dope flying into Arkansas. You got money flying into Arkansas. You've got, there was an arms company that they moved to Arkansas. They were shipping arms, they were shipping people, they were shipping everything. It's a fascinating conspiracy, so if you guys ever get the chance to study it, I think you should. It's all pretty done now. And if anybody was ever to go to prison, I think they would have, but these are professionals, and these guys cover up their tracks, and truthfully, anybody who could have testified is already dead. Hey, have fun with your conspiracies.